This is one of the irregular series of Dangos webinars. And today we're going to be talking about the benefit changes, which are, to a certain extent, I suspect we might find out more speculative than they would have been a few months ago, um, but still fairly certain in terms of the intention of the government and the actions that they wanted to take. I will remind you at this stage, and we'll keep reminding you, I'm afraid, that, as I said, this is a Dangos webinar. We are um, offering the wide range of courses, our basic courses, our intermediate courses, which both focus around benefits and debt, in need of care, which looks at disability benefits in more detail, and the social care system in Wales and some of the issues with that, how it works and how charging operates. Older people and their money, which looks in the main at pensions, both state and occupational and private, and then at pension credit. And children and young people, which looks at the benefit system as it's applicable from pregnancy through to the end of secondary education in the main. We're also working on a new course looking at the end of life, and that is going to be focusing around the kind of issues that individuals and families face financially when the end of life is approaching. We do run the occasional course, which will be expanded on today's webinar on what's changed and changing, but that's when we've got a bit more of a certain idea about what's going on. I'll also remind you that the Dangos forum at dangos.wrac.wales is there with a kind of rolling news service. The materials, including the recording of this webinar and other webinars, as well as material from our courses, and a forum which is badly underused, but we would love to see used for people to ask questions and make points. And with that, I will kick off and introduce today's webinar. Tom Mercer, we're lucky to have with us, is certainly one of the UK experts on what's likely to happen to the benefit system in the future, as well as being one of our Dangos team and one of the frequent presenters of Dangos sessions. Is going to, and of course the author of the big book of benefits and mental health. Is it still called that formally? Yeah. Well worth getting your hands on if you need something to refer to in detail about benefits and particular disabilities. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Tom, who will tell us all about what's going to happen. So over to you, Tom. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gareth, and hopefully you can hear me. And thanks everyone else for being here. As Gareth was saying, the changes are, it's been a long story to get to some changes which haven't really happened yet, but they are going to start to happen. And the theme is two things. Some of the things that we've thinking are going to happen aren't quite going to happen because there was a lot of toing and froing in the machinations at Westminster around whether or not the Act would pass as the government wanted. So lots of concessions and mitigations came into it. And then there is stuff that we know is happening in broad sense, but where the detail naturally follows later down the process. So I'll be introducing those steps and making some, I hope, reasonably informed, lightly speculation around what this might look like without trying to pretend we can say this person is definitely going to gain out of this change. Such and such a person is going to lose out of that change. We can't say that for definite. We can make some broad sort of ideas given the direction of travel, what's going to happen. So we've got a new team at the Department of Work and Pensions, led by Pat McFadden, who's Secretary of State. And there are a couple of familiar faces, those of you who are aware of the ministers, and many of them are new, reshuffled. You can click the link when you look at the slides if you want to see the whole team. And if you want a different take, and it's not at all flattering, so I'm not saying I agree necessarily with all of this in it, but you can have a look at the Benefits and Work blog, who put it gently that they don't like the new appointment. But why are they doing it? Well, the main aims are a renewed mission on welfare to work. That's very much a kind of thing that Pat McFadden has been talking about in interviews. He's a bit of a cabinet enforcer, or has a reputation of that. So that's why he's been appointed. That when there are future changes, when the government has worked out what it's going to do next, his job is to make sure it happens. A bit of negotiation, yes, but very good at doing that chief whip type thing. He's a bit of an eminence grise in the legends within the Labour Party. Um, so that's the plan. And a part of that emphasis on welfare to work for people with health issues will be increased by the DWP taking over the skills, put some of the skills portfolios, certainly in England from the Department of Education. And I guess those will be what will happen with devolve, whether some things will shift from Welsh Government to DWP. Not 100% sure how that works. That might get too complicated. So what are the key steps in the changes? Well, we've had a lot of stuff already, haven't we? That this discussion has been going on and causing some anxiety and concern to people affected with health problems right since the previous government in autumn 2023. They had a series of white papers and green papers and some firm proposals about changing the work capability assessment this year, and all of those kind of ideas. All of that disappeared in the general election, but it was a background. It was an anxiety for everyone under for the new government. And so far, the new government, we had a sort of general Get Britain working white paper, which was to set the scene really for a long awaited, it took a long time to come. The Pathways to Work Green Paper really sets out the stall for health and disability reform. And the first stage of that was that troubled and eventually much shorter than expected UC and PIP Act, which received its formal assent just earlier this month, although all the arguments and processes happened over the summer. We then got some new things coming up which will set more details. So there's a white paper due this autumn, which will talk about the new employment insurance. I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment. And we've got further announcements will be made about the details of the changes coming up this April. For example, they will happen around the budget, and there'll be some announcements within the budget, but before and after the budget, the DWP will be doing things and regulation changes, things to make the detail happen for April and possibly give a clearer timeline going beyond into the next 2 or 3 years. And then we actually get the rollout of these changes. And we also know there's going to be a Tim's review of personal independence payment, which is going to needs to report by autumn of next year. So that's the menu of changes to absorb. Where does that leave us? Well, before I get into the main body of health and sickness benefits, just a word on winter fuel payments, which was very controversial for the government and seen as, a political mistake, upsetting the pensioners. So it used to be that 100% of pensioners, if you were of pension age, you would get a winter fuel payment. It actually came in to sort out a previous controversy. It came in as a government buying itself out of the trouble that was political trouble that was caused by nothing they'd actually done this time. It was the pension rate was only increased because of the inflation at that particular time, and it was linked just to prices. The pension went up by 75 pence, and that caused a wave of anger. So they introduced a winter fuel payment as a sop to that anger. because there are a lot of pensioners and they do have a habit of voting, so no government wants to upset them too much. But this government seemed to upset them by reducing it to only 20% of pensioners could qualify. You needed pension credit or equivalent last winter to get a winter fuel payment. What's replacing it? Well, it's sort of going back to universal, but not every pensioner will end up with it. So what happens is it will be received, it will be sent out under the old as before, but then any pensioner who's got more than 35,000 in taxable income will have the money reclaimed. A simpler version of what happens with child benefit, if you like. There won't be a taper or reduction like that. It will just be a below 35k you can have it, above 35k you can't. Tax, of course, is done individually. So how do they do it with couples? Well, they conceptually split the winter fuel payment in half so that if one partner in a couple is over 35,000, half of the winter fuel payment will be reclaimed. If both of them are under 35, then they'll get the full one. And if they're both over 35, they won't get any, the whole winter fuel payment will be reclaimed. But it will all be paid out and then reclaimed. That's the principle of it. So there is people have been at it on the how does this work, and pointing out that this very simple way, they're trying to avoid having a complicated means test. So this very simple way of doing it does throw up some weird effects. So for example, you've got three couples. Couple A, they're each on 35,000. They've got a total income between them of 70,000. Well, they don't get to keep any of the winter fuel payment. It will all be reclaimed. Couple B, who just happened to be on 34,999 each, so they got a total income of 68 or 69k, they get to keep all of their winter fuel payment. And then you've got another couple C, where one partner's on 35k and the other is only getting 15k. They've got a combined income of 50k, but they only get half of their winter fuel payment. So that kind of injustices at the way it works at the top. But for the majority of pensioners, they will get to keep a whole of it. In fact, 80% of pensioners will get to keep their winter fuel payment, 20% will have to repay it. That 20% could choose not to receive it. So you can opt out of receiving your winter fuel payment. Why would you bother with that? Well, it's because you'll have extra paperwork with HMRC to negotiate to sort out your repayment, and then you'll have to do the repayment. So you might decide, nah, I'm clearly not going to have to repay it, so I'd rather not receive it in the first place. So there is an option there. 35k sounds like a lot of money, but it is worth remembering that when you're on retirement age, things that you think of not really as income, like drawing out a big lump sum out of your pension pot, that will be taxable income for that year. So that probably will be the only thing that will knock me over the 35k. I'll be passing around the hat and for contributions, would be the fact of taking a bit of a lump sum that year. Then we got rate changes coming up. That's the simple things from next April. So that's the first hint of big changes happening for health and sickness and disability benefits. So you've got the general uprating. We haven't got the confirmed September figure that will come out next month, and that sets the CPI rate, which determines what most benefits go up by. But it's looking something like 3.8%. We'll know in a few weeks' time. But the triple lock is either CPI or its earnings, or it's a flat rate of 2.5%. Well, it's earnings this time because we know the relevant earnings figure is already known, and that's 4.7%. So that's what to the state retirement pension. Um, I'll just push a button. I think somebody's got their mic on, but if I can get the participants, and I'll mute everybody, but do feel free to unmute. Have I muted myself? I'm not sure. Okay,
No,
so
you're fine.
I'm fine. Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. So yeah, we got the general up ratings and the 4.7%. But of course, we've got the local housing allowance. Will that change? Last changed in 24, so it may not be due for a change. But of course, an annual change is always overdue for the local housing allowance because housing inflation, actually, the rent inflation is higher than normal inflation anyway, but it gets done every few years, catches up. And then the benefits cap is not due for an increase until 2027. So that means any increases will just not be wiped out by those not being adjusted. The other one coming up, of course, is a lot of people will have been migrated over in the last couple of years to universal credit with transitional protection. Those that have lost lose out in the sums. And as a result, any increase the next April will be absorbed into their by a reduction, an equivalent reduction in their transitional element. So a lot of people won't experience any increase at all. Then we move on to changes in the UC rates, which are linked as part of the welfare reform for sickness, particularly the sickness elements of UC. So initially, it's changes in the rates. So the idea is that the standard rate, the gap between standard rate and the extra amount you get, the limited capability for work-related activity element, if you pass the work capability assessment into what used to be called the support group, now the LCWRA group, that the gap is too large. So the plan is to increase the standard amount just a little bit, but it will cost a lot to do it. So eventually, by April 2029, it should be worth £6 more a week. The government have been talking weekly. We all know that UC is monthly, but in the green papers, the talk is weekly amounts, um, presumably to keep comparison with the legacy benefits. But anyway, it's going to be equivalent to £6 extra per week by then in small doses. However, if you're new to the LCWRA element, so if that happens to you after April, you are awarded that element, then instead of the equivalent of £98 a week, it will only be worth £50 a week. Um, but for a few people, we'll get the first signs of what they're talking about as a new universal credit health element. And it first appears as a top up to the current LCWRA element. And this will be for the most severely disabled, basically those who are defined by the work capability assessment severe conditions criteria. Which are basically people who would be left alone, given a sort of indefinite WCA rather than put on the timetable for reassessment. Um, and so they'll get the extra 48 quid. Now, if you're already on the LCWRA element at the current £98 a week rate, then you will keep it. So it's important that you don't come off UC and come back onto it, or you'll get a nasty shock. But the amounts, there was talk originally that they were going to freeze it at 98, so it wouldn't go up for future years, for the next 3 years or so. So that again, the gap between the standard rate and the poorliness rate would close a little bit. However, during the talks about universal credit, they gave way on that in the hopes of getting people to vote for the PIP changes, which of course are not happening. In theory, they will not be doing the freeze. But of course, they didn't get their side of the bargain. So we'll wait and see. Will the freeze come back into the picture? The budget will tell. The other thing that's going on at the moment is the migration to universal credit. So hopefully you're well used to it, well versed, and things I hope things are going a bit more smoothly for people migrating now that some of the errors that were happening at the beginning have eased. But be very interesting. Please throw in your comments into the chat as we go for this and everything else I'm talking about, and then we'll pick all of that up in discussion when I got to the end of this PowerPoint by death. So tax credits, well, that's all done and dusted, isn't it? Because tax credits finished early in 2025, in last April. But there will still be issues coming forward for advisors to requests for advisors to help around things like people who had more than 16,000 savings had a capital disregard. Their savings were ignored for a year, and the anniversary of their migration to UC will start passing as time moves on, and then they'll be faced with issues about, do they have to come off universal credit because they got more than 16,000? Can they spend some of it? Is it deliberate deprivation? All of that malarkey. There may still be some outstanding disputes with which would have been with HMRC, now with DWP, about historic whether the transitional protection was done correctly, and also tax credit overpayments that were historic ones that HMRC hadn't done anything about, but then got transferred in a sort of cleaning the books exercise and dumped onto people's universal credit accounts. So people might feel, hold on, that should never have happened. There might be challenges. And it doesn't help in resolving those challenges that, of course, HMRC tax credit service has now completely wound down and isn't there. So HMRC won't explain why they got this overpayment from. So it's going to be down to DWP trying to understand tax credits. But the main one that's going on at the moment then is mainly people with income who were on or who are at the moment on income related ESA moving over to universal credit. The last migration notices are due out just before Christmas. And that means that as it gives you 3 months in which to claim your UC, that your UC will be due to expire in March 2026. The last people moving over will do so in March, unless they miss their deadlines and go over time. Some of the issues that pop up around migration are making sure you've got 3 months, so you don't have to rush at it, but you do need take your time, breathe, and try and get the advice and support if you need some, if you don't feel able to do it your own. But is that advice around? Um, if you get in contact with an advisor, it is still worth them looking around and checking your current entitlement to legacy benefits and taking action to maximize it. That action may not be completed by the time you've got to put in your UC claim. You may long be on to UC before you get any of that done. It's still worth doing. Why? Well, one, you might get some quite chunky arrears in your legacy benefits, and you'll still be able to get those sent over to you, even though you will have left legacy benefits. The other is that although the transitional protection sums are done at the day you move over, it's based on your entitlement on that day. If your entitlement subsequently changes, even if it's some months down the line for that day, then they can redo the sums. So you'll get more universal credit, more transitional element as a result. So it is still worth doing. You need to claim, you've got a deadline day, 3 months from your notice. You ideally, for the smoothest transition, claim by deadline day. If it all goes pear-shaped and you've forgotten and you've missed your deadline day, you have 1 month to act for final deadline day, because then your claim will still be backdated and it will be linked up to your old claim. If you do not claim by final deadline day, so today, for example, if I've got a deadline day today, which is the 23rd, then my final deadline will be the 22nd of October. And if I get my claim in by then I will get all the protections that go with the migration. If I don't do it until the 5th of November, then everything will have gone up with smoke along with the bonfires. I won't get any of those protections. And it does mean that if I'm on the limited capability for work element, because historically I been on long enough, I will not be able to get, sorry, the work-related activity component of ESA. I will not be able to go straight to the LCW element. That will have lost and gone forever. So there are those, and there'll be a new problem for people in March if they leave it until April and have to do a complete new claim for UC, then they'll be hit by the reduction to the LCWRA element as well. So particularly for those people, they do need to get the final deadline day. Um, you will pass through, if you do the by deadline day, by the final deadline day, then your work capability assessment status will migrate with you over to UC. So you do not have to resit the WCA and wait 3 months for any extras. You should get the extras in your first payment, carrying on with the status you had from your ESA. If you miss the final deadline day, you're going to have to wait 3 months and do the WCA again. It's going to be worth checking the transitional protection is correct, and also to get it revised after any action comes through for perhaps getting yourself a retrospective severe disability premium and therefore upping your legacy benefits and redoing the sums for your transitional protection. All right, this has gone and clicked in a funny order, the alternations there. So what is the case for sickness and disability reform? I'll just get this slide all up. There was a common theme for both the last government and the current UK government, even if there were differences in emphasis and solutions, very different approaches, but the same basic problem was, why are the numbers claiming and therefore the budgets for PIP really projected to shoot up by 2930? And what about sickness benefits, benefits for being unwell for work? And the claims, unlike other comparable countries, the claims are not falling at the same rate as those countries. And so the government has focused, and the last government focused in on the problem is with claimant behaviour and with the system, not blaming the claimants as such, but the system is creating perverse incentives to claim as sick when you're not really. Even talk of lifestyle choices. Of course, to claim as being unwell, you need to get through the system of the WCA and convince a not always sympathetic healthcare professional that you score the necessary points. Or perhaps the tests for sickness are just too easy, or perhaps we need to really firm down on medical diagnoses, that people are the lifestyle choices, particularly aimed at people with mental health, that because it's very difficult, it's a long queue to get yourself a diagnosis. You may have real, genuine and serious mental health difficulties, but you don't have a firm diagnosis. Can we get those people? Is there something wrong going on? All of those system behavior arguments. What hasn't been so prevalent in the discussion, well, it is mentioned now and then, is thoughts about the growth in the NHS waiting lists. And if you're longer on the waiting list, you're going to be a bit poorlier for longer while you wait. The growing impacts of growing social inequality and poverty, the effects of long COVID, greater insecurity in the workplace, precarity, as some people call it, if I can remember what the word is, the cost of living crisis impacts, the effect of previous social security policies, like the past benefit caps, like the two-child limit, and the abolition of the LCW element, the limited capability for element for new claims since April 2017, means that decision makers and claimants alike need to get, in order to get any extra payment, they need to get into the support group, into the LCWRA group. Whereas in the past, more people might have been in that LCW group. So all of those create some of the issues. Where's it happening? Well, there's a map across the of the UK, and the darker areas are where the highest concentration. This is just for disability benefits. There are similar maps around. I couldn't find one, but it almost follows exactly the same level of it being an issue. So for Wales, yeah, the Broads geographically, there's lots of lighter colours in the middle, but where people live in Wales along the M4 and A55 corridors, we've got a lot of those dark areas, some of the highest local authority areas, and you can see on the table, Blaenau Gwent tops the UK for council areas, followed closely by Neath Port Talbot, Merthyr, and then Scotland comes in within the Clyde. And so it's the northwest and northeast of England, the central belt of Scotland, the valleys, and some of the northeast of Wales are areas with much higher claiming of disability and also of sickness benefits. So it's going to hit, these changes are going to affect us more in Wales than perhaps they might in the southeast of England. So what changes are coming with the sickness benefits? Well, we've got those changes in rates. That's the first thing. I've already mentioned, gone through those on that previous slide. So that those are happening this April coming. But then alongside that, they're bringing forward, it originally was going to be left until 2028, but the 1 billion increase in support, again, this was a change in the Universal Credit Bill passage. That is the plan is to start doing that this April. Obviously, the budget might say we ain't got the money and it might be delayed back again. But the other thing that is happening this April is a right to try guarantee, which will promise that if you have a go at trying work, then for at least 6 months, you will not be subjected to a new WCA work capability assessment because you're managing work at the moment, nor if you come off UC because you're earning enough to do so, and then you need to return to it because the job doesn't work out, you'll be guaranteed to return at your previous rates with your LCWRA element and so forth. So that's the guarantee bit. As far as the work capability assessment itself, the plans to change it, to really move around to swap around the levels between those in the support group, LCWRA group, and those in the work-related activity group, to swap around the percentages, which is what the last government planned, that's all been abandoned. Nothing is going to happen to the work capability assessment. It will stay as it is until it gets abolished. For the next slide, there's a spoiler alert. But the work capability assessment will be tight, not change, but there will be more resources to the DWP to pick up the pace on reassessments, which kind of fell into disuse, partly because the contracts sort of fizzled out and they couldn't deliver the reassessments. And then, of course, during the pandemic, reassessments were all put on hold. So it's going to be back to the previous pre-pandemic rates of reassessments. Then we're looking at longer term changes to UC if you are unwell. And the big change there, it's all in outline. We know broadly the direction. So the UC white paper and all the stuff that may be issued and more details around the budget in November will give us a lot more clarity about the details. But we do know that there is a plan. It may be dropped. There's lots of pressure to do so, but it's there anyway, that from April 2027, claims for a health element, or basically for the limited capability topped up by a health element, will not be available if you're aged under 22. There's only 66,000 claimants across the UK who are under 22 and getting these elements. So it's not quite a massive problem, as politicians often airily talk about young people being making lifestyle choices to be poorly. And it hits people, the small minority, because most younger people are healthy, curse them, but they don't. Uh, they might, those that are may have quite actually profound difficulties right at the start of their working lives. They're going to have some disincentives and less support than just for the sake of being under 22. It particularly hits care leavers because of a lot of mental health and challenges that come through the careless system. More details to follow on that one. And then we've got the autumn white paper is specifically about merging. We'll put the detail on merging what is becoming New Style JSA and New Style ESA from April of 2028. So the idea is it will be one benefit, it will be paid for longer, and that we don't know how long for. And it will be paid at the highest rates, which are around £140 a week, which is what ESA in the support group pays. So that might be great for some people. If you're a job seeker who only gets 6 months at 92 quid, the thought of getting maybe a year or 2 years at 140 is a definite plus. But for people who would have got into the support group under ESA, which is indefinite at the moment, they will suffer from the fact that it'll only be paid for whatever time will be set out in the white paper. And that could mean the end of a century-old feature of the UK social security system of having an early medical retirement protection scheme. Then in April 28, we get the abolition of the WCA, the work capability assessment. It goes completely, and then there's a new role for PIP stepping into the breach. So the health element, which all will come into being initially this April, will expand and take over from limited capability. And the entitlement will basically, instead of being based on assessment of your uh, difficulties in seeking work, the WCA, it will be based on your PIP status. So that will be the prime determinant of whether you get a health element or nothing at all. Exactly how that health elements work, what rates, what will be the structure, we don't know. Will they follow the 26 structure of having one flat rate with a top up for a small group? Will they do something different, have two rates like they do for children and young people in the Child Disability Edition, where you get a higher rate if you're in the enhanced daily living part of PIP? Details will come out. Well, how exactly it will work. So, and a lot of it is, well, you can expect the language. Well, this is a new assessment for a new element, just like when PIP came through. So the fact that you're on LCW or LCWRA will have no impact on what you get on the health element. It's purely about your PIP status. But what transitional protection will there be for people who have been getting the LCWRA element when that element is actually abolished in April 28? Again, details to follow. But you can say broadly that some people look like they might gain and others look like they might lose from the changes. So here is a bit of pure speculation, but I hope it makes sense coming up here. So there were three broad groups of people who currently get the limited capability elements within universal credit. There are some people who just get the limited capability elements and do not qualify for PIP. Perhaps their health problems are too short-lived for PIP, or because it's a different test, even if they applied for PIP and were going to be ill long enough, they might not get the points to get PIP. So they are going to lose, obviously, depending on what transitional protection is available, they're going to lose out. And they're also going to lose, not just financially, but they might lose out from the security of knowing that I have no work requirements on the one hand, or I do have some work requirements, but just work preparation, which is, the byproduct of being put into one of the WCA groups. The next group are people about 1.4 million who get both an unlimited capability element, but also have PIP paid on top. Now, the gain depends so much on the rates, but they might sort of stay about the same. Or hope to stay the same financially, and they have the benefit of only having to have one assessment every few years instead of two. Now that's got a pro, less hassle, but the con of that is that everything will hang on that one assessment. If your PIP goes wrong, then your UC gets reduced as well. Whereas at the moment, if they happen at different times, then you can lose one, appeal it, and only lose a bit of money and still hang on to the other chunk of money. But it will all be more dramatic if you get turned down at reassessment. You also, there's same concerns about losing the certainty of your particular group. That's sort of an extra worry for people. And then you've got finally the 0.7 million people who get PIP who are on universal credit, getting PIP, but do not qualify for the limited capability element. And that's because perhaps they've failed the test or they've never claimed it because they're claiming UC as workers, as job seekers, as lone parents, as carers. That's their main route into UC. They just happen to have PIP and they just happen to have suffered from UC not having an adult disability element all these years. Well, now effectively UC is going to get one. So what's not to love about that? If you're in that category, you're going to get an extra amount. As far as your work requirements are going to be, well, they're not nothing to do with the limited capability groups, but you might be in the same group. You might be a carer who also has no need to be work seeking, and you will stay as a carer with no work requirements. Or you might be a lead parent who has a work preparation requirement, and you'll carry on with that. So the work requirements, what happens to everyone? So some will stay with their existing work requirement, which is not to do with their health issues. But what happens to those whose work requirement is all set according to their health issues? Well, what looks very likely, the regulations will confirm, but the rhetoric in the Green Paper suggests that they're going to adopt that personalized individual assessment. So, like what happens now for people who are first become unwell whilst they're on universal credit and first apply for work capability assessment. While you wait for that assessment, at the moment, you are placed in the all work requirements group. So in theory, you are full on active job seeker. However, at the universal credit work coach's discretion, they could moderate what you need to do or just do a bit of work preparation for now because I can see you're not very well and I don't want you to and we'll talk about it again once you've had your work capability assessment, or they can actually waive it completely and say you are pretty poorly. I think you're probably going to be in that LCWRA group, so I'm not going to ask you to do anything until you've had your assessment. That's what happens now for people at the start of a sickness claim under UC, and that probably is going to be the model for an individualized assessment. Now,
Okay.
sorry.
Yes, we might want to try and speed up a little bit. We've only got a quarter of an hour to go and quite a lot of slides, and we want to get some questions in as well. So
Okay, my apologies, everyone.
we'll talk
Um,
about the slides later.
yeah, I'll just say very little about future slides then, and you can read them as we get through. But the impact then, straight away, you've got the mechanism for completely swapping round the proportion of people with no work requirements because it'll be discretionary, and so it's much more likely that people are going to have some work requirements. Okay, more flexible and tailored than before. So nothing's happening with PIP, so skate over that. But there is going to be the TIMS review. And that you can see the terms of reference. This is not about alternative cuts. It's about rebuilding the relationship of trust between disability groups. And so it's looking at an overview and how could we improve PIP. Then after that will come any Treasury decisions about plans for change to that PIP in the light of what of improving PIP. There's some concerns there for the UN rapporteur has mentioned certain problems with UN conventions that UK signatory to. Meanwhile, the End of Life All Party Parliamentary Group has expressed certain concerns for people who are terminally ill, which are mentioned there. There's a little bit on child poverty. That's in the air as to what's happening. And particularly what could be done about the elephant in the room, which is the two-child benefit cap. And there's a little bit more about that. Um, but it's now opposed by all of the political parties except the Conservatives, and it will be mitigated in Scotland from April 2026 anyway, because they're going to pour money into where they're going to get the money from is going to be the challenge. It's a growing impact going on. What are the options? Here is a little chart you can have a look at about the different ways of mitigating the two-child limit. There are different options, short of abolishing it completely, and the cost of doing that versus um, uh, uh, versus the number of children it would lift out of poverty. So over to you. Thanks so much for that. I do apologize for going on too much. And any questions, Gareth and I will have a go at answering.
I hadn't meant you to quite gallop quite that quickly towards the end there. Um, but thank you, Tom. That was a kind of tour de force, an enormous amount of information getting across in a limited amount of time. And my apologies for squashing some of the detail on the last few slides. Um, they will be there on the Dangos forum for you to look at and download if you want to, as well as a recording of the webinar. I'll make one quick point to emphasize. Remember when you talked about taking money out of your pensions affecting the winter fuel payment, the lump sum at 25%, of course, is tax free. So that's safe. That's not going to affect it. It's people taking other kind of elements of drawdown from their pension savings that might have an effect on their entitlement to the winter fuel payment. But I want to kind of cast this open to people now to ask questions or make comments. We have one question in the chat from Kirsten Sedgwick. Any changes proposed to LCWRA via the cancer report form route? And will people then be on the lower rate from April if it's a new WCA?
uh, in no changes in terms of the bit if you're going through treatment, two routes through for people affected by cancer. One is if they meet the special rules for terminally ill, if they've got a gloomy prognosis, then they're straight through to the LCWRA group. And then others who may have a much more hopeful prognosis but are going to go through chemo, and they don't have to do the full WCA, but their payment is under the normal rules. Um, the lower rate is going to be a reduction in what that LCWRA pays. So they will be that will happen for new people after April. However, they may fit into the severe conditions criteria under WCA. Certainly the people who are terminally ill will carry on. They'll get the top up. And people who are not may well fit into the WCA, but severe conditions criteria, but I have to examine those in detail to be sure that everyone's safe if they're going through chemo. I'm not 100% sure that they will be. There might be some who might need some advice to push that.
It's always a problem with changes, isn't it? The uncertainty about the effects on individual claims and the way in which the rules are interpreted and the way in which the rules are applied. Um, and that's of course the value of the advice services that we have in Wales and the capacity of people to support things like appeals. Okay, if people want to post any questions in the chat or just simply unmute yourselves and maybe even turn your cameras on and ask any comments or make any points there, now's the time to do that. So do take up the opportunity to ask an expert, as Tom is, about anything that concerns you, even if it's around a kind of an individual anonymized situation that you know about.
And please also feel free to comment or say anything about the slides, the issues that I rushed through at the end. So if people want to talk about two-child limit a bit more, I can go back to that if that's
There,
a
there, there has been a bit of a kind of information out today about the benefit cap that's just been published by DWP Statistics that talks about the number of households subject to the benefit cap has increased by over 10% in the last 3 months, which is a pretty kind of damning kind of figure, I think, there. And of those, a very high number of people have more than two children. Um, so 82% of all capped households include children, the stats say, and almost 70% of capped households are single parents. Is that the kind of thing that you would be expecting to see, Tom?
Uh, yeah, I suppose because some parents are not getting the two-child benefit cap, the two-child limit, because their children are that bit older, and so you've got a parent who's not got a huge benefit sort of entitlement. They're living in a housing association place in Wales where the rents aren't so high, and they happen to have three children without a two-child limit. They are actually definitely going to be hit by the benefit cap, which never would have happened when the benefit cap came through. So there has been a growing impact of the cap in Wales. But what's particularly happening in the last 3 months is trying to. I'd be interested to dig a little bit more to find out what is it that's causing. It could be rent levels, but they're controlled by the LHA. So
Well,
uh,
I suppose it's the fact that whilst benefits have risen, the benefit cap figures haven't. So more people are being pushed into it all the time.
yeah,
And isn't that one of the issues that might be a problem? So if you abolish the two-child limit, well, that's great. But unless you also move or abolish the overall benefits cap,
yeah.
quite a lot of those people, they will see the notional benefit that they get because of the children increase. But all that that might do is to push them into or further into the benefit cap, so they won't see any real benefit from it. Is that likely?
Yeah, that is going to be, the two need to go hand in hand if we seriously want to tackle child poverty. And it does make a huge difference. It's not all about benefits, and there's great stuff the Welsh government does, which the UK government is learning from as part of its child poverty strategy. But Wales is well behind Scotland, and that's not because they're a better government in Scotland. They have the money and the devolution powers, so they've got the Scottish Child Payment, and that single payment effectively reduces the impact of the benefits two-child limit, and child poverty rates are much lower in Scotland than they are in Wales, purely from that benefits. So it's not just about benefits, but it makes a huge difference.
It does, although it's having a huge impact on their own budget problems, of course, as
Absolutely,
well.
yeah, yeah. So they're going to have to row back, I'm sure, because
That's back to the Barnett formula and how the money gets distributed. Alison's asking whether the slides will be sent out. We can do that if people want to email Dangos. Otherwise, you can download them from the Dangos forum. They're already up there now, and the recording of today's webinar will be up there hopefully this afternoon. The link is on the slide. You can scan that code that's there and go straight to the forum. Or you can go to dangos.wrac.wales if you want to use the old-fashioned typing in method of putting an address in there. Um, Anybody with any further questions or comments? Now's your chance to ask about anything that interests you or concerns you. Otherwise, do you want to move on to the next slide, Tom, and we'll kind of advertise some of the Dangos stuff?
Oh, so yeah.
So yeah, as I said earlier, don't forget that the Dango sessions are there. Great for getting yourself or your staff and teams and so forth on there. We do the sessions as in-house courses for teams, or you can book on individually via dangos.wales or dangos.cymru. Our sessions are on the basic benefits, great for people coming in new to their work. Intermediate, which is a great reminder and great update of people who are already working in the area, and those two focusing around benefits and around debt. And then in need of care, which looks at the social care system in Wales and disability benefits. Children and young people, that looks at all the benefits available from sort of pregnancy through to the end of schooling, but also looks at the help that's available to people in schools, pupils, and people in kind of non-advanced education as well there. Older people and their money tries to break down that complexity of the way in which pensions and benefits work together or sometimes work against each other. And a really important point that has been around now, but unnoticed almost for the last 9 years, is that people who are on benefits and have pensions have some options open to them, which can really affect the amount of benefit, the amount of overall income that they get, depending upon their awareness of the options and how they use them. What's changed and changing, once we know some more certainty about some of the changes, we'll be putting a course together on that. And support at the end of life, which is looking at all those kind of issues that affect the individual and the family as people facing terminal prognosis or aging and all those other kinds of situations. They book them at dangos.wales or dangos.cymru, either as in-house courses or as individual places on public courses. And don't forget, the forum is there, provides a news service, provides a place to download all of this material, but it also provides a place where you can ask questions and get detailed help from experts in Wales around benefits and other kinds of issues. We're coming up to 1 o'clock, so I'm going to thank Tom very much indeed for having produced and delivered that. And my apologies for making him gallop a little bit at the end there. But one last chance for people to ask any questions or make any comments. Lots of thank yous coming up in the chat, so grateful for that. Don't forget to make sure the people you work with and come across know about what Dangos is offering and what we can do. And we'll be putting more webinars in place and circulating that information over the next months. Okay, with that then, thank you very much, Tom.